Hello. I wanted to share my story today about how God spoke with me. It all started when I was sleeping and I get emotional when I talk about all of this. Um, when I had a dream that was very real, it was, it felt like the realest dream I've ever felt before. And it wasn't a good dream. It was, my husband was in his Corvette and he was in a major car accident and his car was smashed. He was laying there and he was like on his back and he was convulsing and it was so vivid. I remember seeing the blood coming out of his like mouth, his nose, everything. And so when I woke up, I told my husband, I said, and it's not the first time that I've had, I don't know, premonitions and things like that. So I took that as a warning message, like God was warning me to let him know. So I told my husband, I was like, I told him all about the dream, and I felt horrible telling him, like who would want to hear that? But I felt I had to. So I told him, I was like, please drive safe. Like this was a message. And he, I don't know, like I guess didn't take it as serious as I did because he didn't know about all my premonitions in my life. So, but I told him and I was like, just make sure you drive safe. And so every morning when he would go to work, I would tell him the same thing and I would always remember the dream. And I would say, drive safe. And that morning, we both stayed up doing a contract, and we went to bed. And normally I get up and make his breakfast every morning, and I was tired, so I stayed in bed. And I asked him, "Do you want me to make your lunch?" And he was like, "No, that's okay, babe. Get some sleep." So he made himself a sandwich and he went to work, and same thing. I said, drive safe. He said, I will, I love you. And then normally we communicate during the day, like on his breaks and things like that. And I had messaged him, and man, I had messaged him and I didn't hear back. So I was like, well, he's probably busy fixing one of the machines. And then something was like, no, something's wrong. And I was like, no, like he'll text me back. Well, he didn't. I figured he was just still busy with the machines. Well, I'm downstairs working on the computer, and I keep getting this phone call. And I had been at that time applying to see if I could get on with like different places, like all over Loma Linda, and the phone kept ringing and it was Loma Linda. And I was thinking, and I had changed my mind at that time. I was like, no, I'm focusing on, I had a change of career, and so I'm focused on what I'm doing, so I didn't answer the phone. And it called again, and it called again. And I'm like, something was like, pick up the phone. And I was like, no, like I don't. And then finally I did. And it was Loma Linda. It was a social worker. And he had told me that my husband was involved in a car accident. And I said, oh my God, let me speak to him. And he was like, no, you can't. You don't understand. He's literally on the operating table right now. I'm right here. And I said, you don't understand. Like, I need to speak to my husband. I know him, and he has to hear my voice so he can fight. He's like, ma'am. He's like, well, let me ask if that can be done. So I was on hold, and then he comes back, and he's like, okay. He's like, I'm gonna walk over to him right now. And then a little bit of a pause. He goes over there. He's like, okay, ma'am, the phone is to your husband's ear. And so then I started talking, and I was telling my husband, I was like, I love you so much, hang in there. Like, God's looking out for you. Please stay here. I love you so much. Like, fight. And it was like, it was every word I could say with all my strength going into him to help him fight. And then I was like, so he heard, right? And he's like, yes, he's, I don't know if he actually heard, but he's under, like, going through surgery right now, but I did hold the phone to his ear. So I was like, okay, I knew he heard me. So then from there, I I gathered my things and I was going out to drive down to Loma Linda, and I just totally broke down in the driveway. And I literally, without even thinking, dropped to my knees. And it's not the first time I've dropped to my knees and prayed, but this time was different. It was like automatic, not like I said, drop to your knees. So I dropped to my knees, and then I started just crying and like looking up to heaven and like praying to God. And then the neighbor across the street, she heard me, she saw me, and then she comes running over. And I didn't know her very well at all, just hi and bye. And she comes over and gets on her knees with me, and she asked me what happened. And then I told her. And then she was like, oh my God. She's like, can I say a prayer? And I'm like, yes, please. So we're both on our knees on the ground, and she just raised her hand, and she was just like so powerfully speaking out to God, praying to be with my husband, praying to make him be okay, praying to keep me safe. And it was one of the most powerful moments I've ever felt with a stranger. And so I drove down very, very fast, which I shouldn't have, to Loma Linda. And I get there, and they had said, you know, your husband is still in surgery. So I was waiting, and it was quite a while. And then the surgeon came out, one of the surgeons, and she had said, she had this look of like total like sadness but concern in her eyes, but I love, like, from a loving place. And she walks over to me and she said, and I automatically was like, oh my God, like I thought he might have been dead. And I was like, did he die? And she was like, no. She's like, but she was concerned that he might. And she said that his whole body was hit full on, T-boned by a truck. And I'll post pictures of the car and the truck. But she said it was the most mutilated leg she had ever seen, and they had to amputate. And at that point, I'm like, to me that was like, you might as well tell me I got a scratched elbow. Like, that's nothing. Like, you know, I know it is something, but he was alive, and that's what I cared about. So I was like, just, you know, please, like, you know, just make sure he lives. Like, I love him so much. And then so she was like, I will. And then so she went back into him, and through this whole process, everything, as I said, his whole body was literally hit with a truck. So from head to toe, he had everything going on. He had not only his leg amputated, his other leg was mutilated, like to where they almost amputated that. They were about to, in fact, and he had bleeding of the brain. He had 23 blood transfusions. His every organ shut down. His liver, his kidney. He was completely yellow. His eyeballs were yellow. I've never seen anything like that. He was in a coma. His brain was swollen. He couldn't breathe on his own. He was hooked up to the life-saving support machine. He had to have the thing in his trach in his throat. He had an infection that they couldn't figure out where it was coming from. His heart had stopped not only at the scene of the car accident, but also 2 times. He flatlined one time for 10 minutes. And so everything that could be wrong with a human body was wrong, and he was, as the doctors told me, he was dying. And I refused to believe that. It wasn't even on my mind. I was like, no, like, because I know the miracles that God does. And so I said, okay, so this is where my praying, talking to God is going to save the love of my life. So I would always go to the chapel in the morning, and there at Loma Linda, before I would see him and when I would leave, that was what I did. And I'd always put a prayer in the prayer box, and I always made sure I didn't go on the pedestal. I went on the ground. And that's something I feel that God wants, is like for me to like humble myself as much as possible and be on the ground, and just, it's like I'm communicating with him better. And so after all this had happened, I think like it was maybe in fact the first visit. I can't remember, everything is kind of blurry like during that time, because I was like on adrenaline. And but I remember I was walking out of the hospital, because they were doing some procedures, and they sometimes make you leave the room, and then you get to go back in a little while. And as I was walking down the very busy hallway, still inside the hospital, out to the parking lot, God spoke to me. And this is when everything, like I said, was shutting down on him, and they didn't think he was going to live. And God said, you need to get down on your knees and pray right now. And I was like, communicating with him, and I was like, well, okay, I will pray, but like there's germs on the ground, and he's like, drop to your knees right now if you want your husband to live. And I'm thinking, okay, yes, I'm gonna look like one of those people that you think maybe are like psycho or like a nut or something, but I didn't care. And so I dropped it, because I didn't want to like chance, him not knowing, because I have faith 100%. So I was like, okay, he knows best, like germs, people all around. So I dropped on my knees and I prayed, and I just kept praying. And then it was like, I felt this like relief. And then he heard me, things were going to be okay. And then I walked outside, and there's same thing. I walked out the doors, and in the middle it was like a walkway out to the parking lot, and people are walking by, hustling and bustling, concrete. I drop on my knees, and then it was I don't know, I don't want to say it was embarrassing, but I mean, when you see somebody on their knees in the middle of nowhere, like because we're worried about being judged. So I was like, oh, these people are gonna think something. But I was like, but no, like there's only one thing I care about, and that's God, my relationship with God, and my husband's life. So I put everything else out. Let people say or judge or whatever they want. And then it happened numerous times. Like I'd be in the cafeteria eating, and it would just come at random when God would tell me. So I would drop on my knees in the middle of the cafeteria. And one of the times was in the waiting room when he was going through one of his surgeries. And it was a packed full waiting room, people are talking, sitting there. And then God said, drop to your knees, go pray. So I'm like, there was literally hardly nowhere to sit because it was so packed with people. But so I did it, and I went and I dropped in the middle of all these people. Like they were sitting here, I was sitting there, like I was kind of like in their space. But so I dropped on my knees and I just started praying, and it was so awesome, because then like 3 people started gathering, like another, oh, can I pray with you? Another woman, oh, can I please join you? There was like a whole group of us in like a big circle praying, and we all said our prayer. I said my prayer out loud. They said their prayer. They asked me to pray with them for their loved ones. It was just the most amazing experience ever. And so what had happened is, so as I said, everything had shut down on him. It was one thing after another. So I knew I had to take it one step at a time. So I asked God one thing at a time. So I was like, you know, what was the first thing of danger for him? So the bleeding of the brain, you know, it was for him to wake up from the coma. It was so he could breathe on his own without the machine. It was for his kidneys to kick back on. He was on dialysis. It was for them to find out, you know, how to stop the infection. It was for his heart to stop, to keep working, to quit stopping. Um, it was just, so everything went step by step. And every time I prayed for the first thing, God healed that thing. And then it's kicked back on. And then, okay, then I knew I had to go to the next. And it did that the entire time. And so the doctors at one point when he was hooked up, I mean, he was in a coma. I've never seen a human with their eyeballs like in the back of their head. It was very strange to explain. And they had come to me and said, it's inhumane to keep your husband alive. And we feel like, you know, it's time. And I looked at them and I said, oh, absolutely not. I said, you don't understand. He would want to live for me, and God is healing him. And he looked at me. He knew I was serious, and he said, okay. They didn't unplug the machine, and they kept him alive. And he literally was hooked up to all the machines keeping him alive. And everything started going back, like I said, he got off of the dialysis, you know, everything. And one of the times when I was in the hospital, when I was down in the chapel, because I always went there first, took me about probably 5 to 10 minutes, and I was down there praying, and I went up to the ICU where he was, the most critical one, and he wasn't in his room. And so I'm like, where is he? And they said, they moved him. And so they moved him somewhere else. Well, I went in there and found him, and there was literally probably 15, 20 people all around him. And they had all these machines going. Everybody was like in a panic. And I'm like, what happened? And they said that your husband had flatlined. He died. And it took us 10 minutes to resuscitate him. So those 10 minutes that he was dead was the 10 minutes that I was down there on my knees praying. So it was just another confirmation of like the miracle that God did. So I knew God did that, but the challenge wasn't done. There was still all these other medical issues that had to be fixed with him. You know, he had to get off the machines. He had to, you know, make his heart, you know, stay pumping without stopping all the time. All this, so I kept the whole process up the whole entire time. And when he was transferred to one of the other, they downgrade you, like if you're doing a little bit better, to a different room. And so he got to where he went to a different room, but he was still out of it. They thought he was having brain seizures, so they had like all these needles in his head, and he was still hooked up to. They were trying to figure out the infection. A lot of stuff was still going on, and I was sitting by his bed. I went there every day, and I read him the Bible, and he likes to listen to music, so I would put headphones or have a radio there. I would talk to him as if he was having a full-on conversation, and the Bible was like the main thing that I had to keep reading to him. And one of the times when I was sitting there, there was this blank metal plate. Like, it looks like there was something there at one time. Like, I don't know if it was a TV or something, but it was just metal, and it was above his bed. And I looked at it like quick and looked down, and I'm like, I thought I saw something. And then I looked at it again, and I was like, oh my gosh, like it was actually Jesus's face. Like, and I was looking at it, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So I took pictures, and to this day, I'll post them after, but I have pictures of Jesus's face on this piece of metal, and he was letting me know that he was there. And that was very, very, very powerful. And it was amazing. And to this right now, God answered my prayers. Everything got healed on my husband. He did lose his leg. Everything, the bleeding stopped. His kidneys kicked back on. They found a way to get rid of the infection, and he doesn't have they didn't know if he would know how to talk, walk. You know, he absolutely knows, you know, everything. He's coherent. There is a little bit of sometimes, you know, like issues with memory, like short term sometimes, but it's nothing big time, like even beyond my memory, I feel. So it's been a full recovery as far as I am concerned. Like it is, you know, and that is due to God, and that is due to the faith, and that's the message that God wanted me to put out there, is that it's about faith, and it's about going to Him with a pure heart where you want nothing but to be the best person you can be, and know that He's hearing you, feel that He's hearing you, and don't have like there was no doubt in my mind, like just as though I'm talking to you, like it was 100% that He was there. And that is where the miracle takes place, is that moment of the communication from us and Him feeling and seeing into our soul and our heart, and to Him hearing our prayer. And that's the message I wanted everyone to know, was keep praying to God and keep doing what you have to do to get that prayer to Him, to where you feel that you know He is there, because He is there and He is listening. And my husband is proof of that, and I'm proof of that, and God wanted me to share this message with everyone. So like I said, I'll post the picture of Jesus's face after, but I just want to wish everyone a great day and a happy life, and I hope that God blesses you all. Bye-bye.